So this is the section on IEPs, and some of the things that I wanted to do is I actually want to bring you through what it looks like in an IEP. I know you've already read the textbook, so you have got some of the background information, but I'm actually going to show you what an IEP looks like with a sample IEP. One thing I do want to point out is on page 53, they actually go through the parents' rights in special education. At the beginning of every meeting, you actually hand over what are called procedural safeguards. And those are basically the rights that the parents, legal rights that the parents have. And, they give consent before we do evaluation. They receive prior written notice about any sort of meetings or evaluations, and anything that might affect the placement of their child, that they have their child evaluated by a professional. And if they disagree, they can, of course, have an independent evaluation. They have access, they can review any records pertaining to their child's education. They can be reimbursed to enroll their student in a private school, but only if it's determined that the public school couldn't actually provide services needed for them. They can participate voluntarily in the mediation process. So oftentimes if they disagree with something on the IEP, then they may go to mediation, which means that they sit down with somebody and they try to figure out what's in the best interest of the student. The district shows up, the parent or the family shows up. That there's a way to for due process, so they can file a formal complaint if they disagree, and that there will be an investigation, and that there will be a hearing to figure out, what is best for the student. And that there's certain timelines. So once they sign off saying, they can have an assessment, there's a timeline for that. And that they can appeal things, they can file lawsuits in civil court, they can be reimbursed for any reasonable attorney fees. That's usually only if they win. And that they have access to protective procedures related to discipline incidents. So there's a lot of things, rights that parents have, and they need to be fully aware of these rights, and that each district has worked with lawyers to complete the procedural safeguards that are given at the beginning of these meetings. All right, we've already gone over the response to intervention, and we know that for the special education referral process, you have to bring that data. You, of course, bring the strengths and the areas of concern to that meeting. The team then looks at, usually the school psychologist looks at the processing, the cognition, the social, emotional, behavioral, vocational, developmental, and physical needs and strengths of the student. And usually the special education teacher does the achievement tests. I just want to note that they're not IQ tests for African Americans. They realize that those tests tend to be biased, and so now it's illegal to give an African American student an IQ test. And then to make sure that you're using multiple assessments to really get to know the student, you also have interviews, observations, and an analysis of work samples. So, is it that they didn't do so well on a test because they had test anxiety, or are they demonstrating these struggles in all of their classes or in some of their classes? Then the multidisciplinary team comes together and they determine eligibility. They create an individualized education program. They find the least restrictive environment, or LRE. And then every year, the team should come together for an IEP meeting, and every 3 years they have what's called a triennial, and they do a full assessment, again, of the student. There can be additional reviews if the parent requests them, and of course there's due process if there is some concern about the services that are being provided or the results from one of the assessments. So the big things that you see on IEPs are specially designed instruction. So this is some sort of instruction that's designed specifically for that child around academic, behavior, communication, social, vocational, functional, and or any area that affects the disability. The student might receive related services. So that means like speech and language support, occupational therapy, physical therapy, possibly some counseling or mental health counseling. College and career counseling is another related service. Adapted physical PE, physical education, and possibly transportation to and from the school. The supplementary aids and services are specific to the school site and the educational supports, and the two main ones are accommodations and modifications. So an accommodation is when you change how they're going to learn, so possibly preferential seating, access to technology. If you've ever seen a student with a computer and they hit the computer and then either a command or a sentence comes out, that's the ACC or AAC. Sorry, extra time, fewer problems. These are all different common accommodations. Modifications are what they learn if you change what they're learning. So you give them an alternative assessment or learning objective or an alternative assignment. So you've actually created something new for their learning. Some types of services. So in general ed, some services could be response to intervention or a multi-tiered system of support. Actually, this should be indented here. And they could be behavioral or academic. Also, a 504 plan is another example of a general education service that might come to a student. And a 504 plan is just basically it is a legal document. It's an ADA document, but it goes over what kind of supports a student needs to access the curriculum. So it's a lot of the, smaller accommodations like possibly note-taking might be on there, or vocabulary words ahead of time, or possibly extra time on a test or testing in a quiet area. The 504 plan is created by the general education team and the administration at the school. The special education team and the multidisciplinary team, including the student, the family, the administrator, the school psychologist, the general educator should be present as well, and the case manager. They create the IEP, and there's different components to that, and there's of course different services that we just went over. Placement. I always like to go over placement because what I've done here is, and I would even call it least restrictive environment placement, and the least restrictive environment would be general education, and the teacher just maybe changing some of the ways that they're teaching, so you implementing some response to intervention type strategies and instructional mannerisms. The next one might be inclusion. Inclusion's when you are fully in a general education classroom. That being said, the general education teacher may have some support from special ed on meeting your needs. So, for example, this could be a student with a learning disability who goes into the science room, and then the resource teacher goes in, or the special ed teacher goes in and checks in with the science teacher on how to create graphic organizers for understanding the different chapters. The resource program is similar, where the resource teacher actually usually has some sort of study hall to either work with the students on their different classes, and or they work with them on study skills or organization skills. So it's kind of a check-in to help students be more successful in the general education with having some sort of monitoring from the special education department. A special day class, these are also called day treatment classes. These are classes where the students actually pulled out of the school for or the general education classrooms, and they're in their own smaller classroom, usually less than 12 to 15 students in there, where they can get more support from a special educator. Oftentimes a paraprofessional would be in there as well. Home and hospital, this could be somebody who has been sick and they just need, they're not able to come to the school site, so then a special education teacher actually goes out either to their home or to the hospital if they're in the hospital and brings work for them and does more of an independent study type of style. Non-public school is for students who have not been able to be successful in the public school system. And so they are sent to a school where there's a smaller ratio, so it might be like 1 to 3 or 1 to 2, depending on the level of need of the students who are there. And the district does pay for the tuition for them to be at these non-public schools. The next level is residential. That's when a student actually lives on campus, oftentimes in a hospital or residential facility, and they stay there all day and go to school there. Extended year school year is ESY, and this is for students who have IEPs, oftentimes qualify for ESY, and the idea is that if there's concern that the student would lose some of the skills that they had in May or June over the summer without continued support around their disability, then they may qualify for extended school year where they go to basically summer school. And they're allowed to sometimes make credits if it's high school, excuse me, but also to continue to get support from a teacher around some of the basic skills. So that kind of brings us up to date. The next video will be on going through the IEP.